Hey everyone, we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Erin Tinnen with the National Center on Domestic Violence, Trauma, and Mental Health. Today's webinar will be Responding to Mental Health Crisis, Trauma-Informed Strategies to Support Connection and Emotional Safety. Our trainer today will be Kathy Cave, Senior Training Consultant from the National Center on Domestic Violence, Trauma, and Mental Health. Before we get started, I'll go over some of the technical details of the WebEx software that we will be using for today's webinar. Many of these details are explained on the Using this Webinar System tab in the upper left-hand side of your screen as well. If it helps, you're able to zoom in on the document using the little microscope with the plus sign on it. Please be aware that your screen might look a little bit different depending on whether you're using a Mac or a PC. On the right-hand side of the screen, there are multiple boxes. The second from the top is the chat feature. This feature will allow you to provide feedback and share resources with your fellow colleagues, as well as get in contact with the trainers or myself if you have any questions regarding the training content. You may contact Angelica Medina, also at the center, if you have any questions troubleshooting the WebEx software. To do this, click the down-facing arrow and select the person you would like to contact. You will see a lot of options, but for this session, you'll want to select all participants if you would like to respond to a question from the trainer or contact me anytime during the session. You should click on Angelica Medina to privately contact her if you are in need of troubleshooting the WebEx software. So let's test this chat feature. Will everyone please go to the chat box, select all participants, type in the program you are calling from, and then press enter? Yay, it works for some folks. Excellent. Thank you so much. So while folks can get a lot out of the chat feature, there are times when it moves really quickly and can feel a little bit distracting. So if this is true for you, you can feel free to minimize the chat box by clicking the arrow next to where it says chat. You can always open it again with the same arrow if you choose. We will be providing live captioning during this webinar. Below the chat box, there is a media viewer box. This will contain the captions. If you do not want to see the captions, click on the down-facing arrow next to the word media viewer, the same way you might if you want to hide the chat box. We'll be doing a Q&A with Kathy at the end of this webinar, so feel free to share questions or curiosities in the chat box as we go along. I will be keeping track of people's questions to ask Kathy at the end. If you get disconnected at any point, return to the email you received with the original webinar link and re-enter the training. Sometimes the sound cuts out due to internet connection if you've called in from your computer, so feel free to call in from a landline or a cell phone if that becomes a problem for you. If you're experiencing technical difficulties and you're unable to contact Angelica Medina, you may call the WebEx tech support line in order to resolve any additional issues. That phone number, which we'll also post in the chat box, is 1-866-229-3239. So thank you again for joining us today, and I will now turn the training over to Kathy.
Welcome, everyone, and good afternoon. So we're going to spend some time together talking about, or continuing to talk about, our response to mental health crisis and our services. And I just want to call up the slides. I can see the webinar system document in front of me, but I can't see my slides right now. Thank you. So we're going to spend some time talking more about responding to mental health crisis and our services. And in this series, so we've talked about quite a few things. We had a webinar that was an overview. We talked about peer support. We've talked about thinking kind of big picture about our environment and about strategies for staying connected and respectful. And we wanted to spend some time today talking about what to do when someone can't tell us, when we know that the best source of survivors' information about what helpful is from survivors themselves or ourselves. So it's really thinking about how do we do that? How do we think about what to offer when someone's in crisis and we can't connect, or we're intimidated to connect, or we're concerned about whether or not what we say or do is the right thing. So I wanted to, again, spend some time today talking about some strategies around that. And first of all, to welcome everybody to our time together this afternoon. Many of you may have seen this before. This graphic is actually a picture of our integrated framework that the center has developed and has shared and is really grounded in what we believe about what's helpful for folks and how we know what's helpful for folks. And in thinking about our approach to trauma-informed work, recognizing that it isn't just how are we trauma-informed, it's how do we hold a human rights and social justice context in the work that we do. How do we think about culture and the historical context in people's lives and the current community context in people's lives? How do we think about the ongoing impact of domestic violence and sexual violence as we're doing our work and as we're bringing our advocacy to the forefront? So it's not just one of these things, it's all of these things. An additional layer of what we're thinking about is really maintaining an idea around it isn't just physical safety, but it's emotional safety as well. So some of what we talk about today will relate directly to the idea of emotional safety and how to hold that front and center while we're also trying to do all of the things we're doing in our advocacy and with our advocacy. How do we shine a light on hope and resilience and really acknowledge it when we see it? And sometimes it may be uncomfortable for us on the outside if we're looking at someone else's experience and it's concerning. It's maybe hard to see there's a strength in that or there's resilience in that. But if we can shift our view, we'll notice and we'll say something when we notice. How do we think about the importance of relationship and connection? So when someone is in distress, what we most need to hold is how to stay connected. How do we honor the relationship? Again, even when we're not sure of what else to do, and that nothing happens that people don't want for themselves. So how do we hold a survivor-defined approach, and where that truly means that what happens happens because it's what I want to happen, and how people around me know what I want is because they've asked, and we've had conversations, and people remembered, and people honored that. So we'll talk today about how to hold this background information that's here as we're talking with folks, engaging with folks around their concerns, around their distress, around crisis, and around our own perceptions of what's happening in the moment. So that's the plan. I'd also like to say that we have a document that details the description of our integrated framework, and if folks have not had that, we'll make sure that we send it out to all the participants on our webinar today. I'm having trouble advancing the next slide. For some reason, it doesn't want to go. So I'm going to talk, and if Erin or Angelica, if you get a chance to advance it, there we go. That'd be great. Thank you. During this webinar series, we've been presenting a series of tools to keep in mind to help move us forward, that when we think about crisis, we have a whole toolbox of things to pull from rather than just what comes to mind in the moment. So as a review of all of the sources that we've been sharing with folks in this webinar series, we offer this. We have organizational policies and practices. So we did have a webinar where we talked with some program folks around what kinds of policies and practices are helpful to navigate emotional distress and crisis. We have been talking over time about a series of, a host of mind-body practices, and that in several webinars we've talked about it, but I will also share that we intend to have additional conversations around mind-body practices that could be offered in the moment. So what we know about mind-body practice is that these are tools that in the moment we can offer to folks and we can use ourselves to help navigate our own distress. So it's really thinking differently about what action we can offer in the moment. So we'll talk a little bit about that today, but we will also have additional conversations, and there's some resources on our website. We also have talked about paying attention to the physical and sensory environment, and we'll touch on that again today. But in our overview of mental health crisis and how to navigate, we really spent time thinking deeply about what's in the physical and sensory environment that either supports people when we're in distress or adds to distress. So really thinking about our environments in that way can be helpful, and making some changes that can be preventive in terms of thinking about distress and crisis and how we navigate. In our previous conversation, we also talked about asking about what helps, and I will review a little bit of that information in our conversation today and really get deeply into what are some ideas for when people can't tell us what they need. What do our instincts tell us? What does our practice tell us? What have people told us when they did have voice to share that information? What are people telling us by their behavior? What feels safe and comfortable and connecting, and what may be adding to the disconnect and overwhelm? So we'll continue to have those conversations today. All right. So a little bit more about today's discussion is I'd like us to really think about and thinking out. I'm thinking about this out loud in the moment, but for the time that we're together, if anyone wants to add anything at all in the chat box that either you're doing or that you've found helpful, please share that information. But in our services, survivors are the best source of guidance about what feels physically and emotionally safe, supportive, and helpful. And often we, in our efforts to be supportive, and maybe it's because of our policies, because of practice, because of what we're used to, we often don't always bring to the forefront what survivors have told us works. So it's how do we hold that more closely, and how do we really listen to what folks said? This helps, doing this doesn't help, and can we really keep that in mind and act within those structures for people? And then, again, when people are unable to tell us what's helpful, and what strategies do we have for really holding that, thinking about that, what would be helpful? So my dog is barking, and I really apologize if that's distracting for anyone. And hopefully someone downstairs will take care of that in a moment. In thinking about our approach to working with the diversity of people that we encounter in our work, the different ways that people identify, the different ways that people believe about what is and is not helpful, I wanted to start with a conversation about really making room for a range of survivor views. So sometimes folks may be unsure of or opposed to any information that comes from the mental health system because of either previous experience or fear of experience or what people have been taught about experience. And then other folks will think about mental health treatment in a frame of, I met someone that was helpful to me. I have a diagnosis that was helpful to me. It helped me understand, and it helped me explain and make sense of the things that I've been feeling and thinking and experiencing. So that's one range of things that folks have talked about and thought about. Some folks will also feel incredibly comfortable that the word recovery describes their experience, that they're on a journey that involves healing, that mental health treatment may be part of that journey, and that part of that treatment may include medication. Other folks will say recovery looks different than that, and healing happens because of the multiple holistic approaches that I've had exposure to and been able to participate in, or that I've taken social action. I've joined groups in my community. I've worked hard at a particular cause, and that energy spent in social action in and of itself was healing. And sometimes that social action may include peer support. Other folks have said, I don't understand trauma. I don't know what trauma is about. I don't know about the impact. This is new information for me. Other folks have said, I'm aware of the impact, and I also understand that some of the ways that I respond to people and situations in my life are ways that I have learned to cope with deep pain, and that in my healing, I've learned new ways to cope, and I'm continuing to learn new ways to cope. So as we think about the range of views and how people respond, I wonder if these are conversations that we actively have with people who are using our services. And I would offer that if we're not having those conversations, that we do. So as a survivor of childhood abuse and other kinds of trauma, it's been incredibly helpful in my life when someone has actually said, what do you believe about this stuff? And what do you think? And what have you found helpful? And that we've had those conversations at different points in time because there also may be shifts in views. So it's how do we prioritize having this conversation, introducing this conversation into our work, and then being clear about re-asking the questions, re-having the conversation, and making sure that for people who use our services, we understand what their point of view actually is. So how do we really know what's helpful for people when they're in crisis? And everything that I know about connecting with folks who are experiencing all kinds of challenges, who are feeling all kinds of distress, is that when people are not in distress, talk about that. Ask what helps. And even when people are in distress, that doesn't necessarily mean they can't tell you what's helpful. It's often on a support end. If I want to be helpful, if I'm supporting, if I'm an advocate, it might be my own discomfort that stops me from asking what would be helpful right now. So it's really opening up our practice, opening up our possibilities around asking some questions about what would be helpful. So I had some questions that I just wanted to share with you. And again, I would invite everyone who's on the call to add to the chat box if there are questions that you ask people in advance, when people are calm, when people are clear, when people are rested, when you're in crisis, what does that look like, and is there something that's helpful? That would be great. So while I'm inviting others to share, I'll share some questions that we've talked about at the center. It's actually asking folks, and it may be an index card or it may be a questionnaire, but asking people to actually fill out, write down, or to talk with you and you write it down around what's helpful. So on the inside, I might feel blank. I might feel sad. I might feel overwhelmed. What does that look like on the outside? And actually having a conversation about that. How would someone else know what that distress might look like? Asking people to share things that they can do that help in the moment. So in this moment where I may be feeling overwhelmed, upset, really sad, deeply sad, what helps? Sometimes taking a walk is helpful. Sometimes thinking about my children is helpful. Sometimes being quiet is helpful. Sometimes music is helpful. So actually having conversations about what does that actually look like? What is helpful and what does it look like? And getting a sense about being as specific as you can be. And again, having this recorded, written someplace so that it's easy for people to access when they're in distress. Questions that actually ask more about things that other people can do to help in the moment are also incredibly helpful. So I'm with someone, they're in distress. If I have a sense about what I might offer, where I could say, there were times when we've talked and you said, this is helpful. So would you like to do that now? Would you like to sit quiet together? Would you like to go for a walk together? Are there things that I can offer to you that would be helpful in the moment? And the reason I know about these things is because I listened and I remembered. And those kinds of questions are incredibly helpful. Asking people what helps them feel good and calm and relaxed, and then being able to have some of those things readily available so that people don't have to ask for them, they can just access them. So very much a part of what we offer to others when they're in distress, the things that will be most helpful are the things that we've talked about, I have some familiarity with, they have some familiarity with, and we can offer that. So if we don't do that and we're waiting until people are at deep levels of distress, and then we too may be in some level of distress or excitement because now we're concerned, and we're concerned about all kinds of things. So again, it's taking the time when we have those moments to really listen to what people have to say for themselves. So when someone is in crisis, just to share something from earlier in our series, it's really looking at the whole environment. And there isn't much difference between distress and crisis, other than it's often how it's being interpreted by people who are watching, or people who are on the outside, or people who are trying to help. So I could be in distress as an individual, but I might not feel crisis. People in the environment around me might feel this is escalating to crisis. So it's really important to look at the whole environment. Someone's in distress, other people are in the mix, and then there may be one person or many people together who are trying to come together and be supportive. So the key would be here is to really think about responding to the whole environment. So how do we say to folks who are maybe standing around but not necessarily involved, can we ask them for space? Can we say to folks, can we offer privacy? Can we offer support? Can we offer help? Can we offer assistance? And what that might look like is that people who are in the environment but not involved in the immediate interaction maybe take a step back or go into another space if another space is available. It's also important for the person who's trying to offer support to have what they need. So I think the most helpful thing that we can think about in times of distress is how prepared are we. So part of that preparation is policy. Part of that preparation is, do we have ways of letting each other know as advocates that someone needs our help, and being real transparent about that, someone needs our support, I'm going to stay with this person and stay connected and try to work this through with them. And can everyone else do something else, be someplace else? And if there are other staff available, letting those staff know this is what I need right now so that I can offer support to the person who's in distress. So often when we're worried about the whole environment, it's hard to focus on what does each person who's present need, what do they need, and how do I hold responsibility for this whole space? And that just that line of thinking can add to the sense of things feeling out of control and overwhelming. So I wonder then, what supports that each of us might need, any of us might need, to address the needs of the whole environment, and to do that, to even be able to consider that as things might be escalating with someone that we're concerned about is, did I take the time, can I take the time to center myself? So when we talk about navigating emotional distress and crisis, often our focus is on how do we stop the person we're concerned about from being in crisis. And I think what we're offering through our work is conversation about, can first we center ourselves? And that once I'm centered, I can think about more clearly, what do I need? What do others need? Can we clear space? Can we make space? So it's not just about making something stop. It's actually bringing into the light, bringing into consideration what's happening all around us and how do we respond to that in ways that will continue to support someone. So there's, again, many layers to what's happening, and that the environment itself may be contributing. So first off is to think, again, when we're not in crisis, is there something in our environment that can change? Because we notice that maybe there's something in the space, or there's something in the way that it feels closed in, or it feels too open, or that it feels too energized, or that it feels there's just too much going on and too many people in it. Is there some way to look at our space and say, is this supportive or not supportive? Am I alone in being in this space? If I'm alone, what are my options? So that's where we need to take a step back and think about policies. And do our policies actually support people in distress, or do they add to both the people who are using our services and the people that we're trying to support, and the staff who are trying to do the work, does it add to our distress? If I'm worried about everyone and I'm worried about the space and I'm concerned about property and I'm concerned about being solely responsible for all the things that happen in this space right now, it's really challenging to focus on there's someone here with me who needs something from me. Their distress is present. What can I offer in the moment? And it's hard to do that in clear and calm ways. And one of the other challenges I think that's in the midst is just our views around mental health and mental health challenges, and that there's a great deal of stigma involved in how the information that's out there around mental health challenges and what that looks like. And do we truly understand the nature of distress? Do we truly understand what it means for someone who's been living under siege to now be in our services and experiencing this distress, because this is the first opportunity where they haven't had to be so buttoned up. But we keep saying we're here and we're offering physical, emotional, and emotional safety. Are we really offering that? And when we offer that and people feel that, sometimes distress becomes more apparent. So how do we respond to our own views and biases and experiences around mental health and mental health challenges and substance use challenges? How do we really respond to folks in distress when we're responsible for the whole space? And do I even know right now what would be helpful? And are there all these competing needs, and am I aware or not aware of them? So in really thinking about responding to emotional distress and crisis, it really serves us well to take a step back, look at our environments, look at our policies, looking at, in moments of distress, what is it that we're trying to accomplish, and what support do we have to do that. Distress itself can be rooted in all kinds of causes. So maybe I'm in distress because I'm feeling more safe, that I actually have freedom in this moment to express what's happening for me and what I feel and what's underneath that. Maybe it's because in this environment, even though everyone's telling me that I can be safe here and that people are striving for physical and emotional safety, maybe I feel less safe in it because of microaggressions, because of people not understanding me, because of if I truly say what I'm feeling right now and the level of distress I'm experiencing right now, will I be asked to leave this environment? So people are experiencing in the moment all kinds of reasons for how the distress is surfacing. And then the fear and concern about, even as I'm expressing all this distress, are there going to be consequences? And will I be able to stay, and will people still want to help me, want to support me, want to stay connected? I may be in a place where there are some existing fears, or that I'm recognizing new ones, that very often, again, there's an assumption of safety. There's an assumption that because we intended to offer something that we are actually offering it. And what I experience in this new environment, in your services, in my services, in all the places that in ways we try to support people, if someone in distress is experiencing us as unsafe, that's a reality. And that that helps to acknowledge that. So how we talk with people about what they're experiencing, how we are curious, how we ask questions matter. Some folks may have what they believe are existing mental health conditions. So we talked earlier about a range of views about how people feel about that. And we don't all feel the same, we don't all experience the same, but if we haven't had those conversations, or we're not prioritizing those conversations about how people view medications, how people view their experience, how people view what has actually happened to them and what is happening, continuing to happen. If we're not talking about that, we don't know. So underneath those layers of what we don't know about, there are root causes of distress. How are people really navigating substance use and what's happening for folks? And are people able to tell us when they're using our services, this is what's really happening for me, this is my experience, this is what I use, this is how I use, this is what it means? Are people able to have those conversations with us when they're using our services? Have people slept, not slept? What does that look like? If I'm in services and I have my kids with me, what does that mean for being able to sleep, being able to not be hypervigilant in this moment and close my eyes? I mean, what does that look like for folks? And at what point again, is the distress rooted in just sheer exhaustion? And if we look at isolation and grief, same thing. Are people able to talk about this stuff with us, and are we able to navigate together with them without us judging them and without them feeling judged by us? So there's a lot that's happening underneath when folks are in distress, and can we talk about that? So one of the pieces or strategies that's incredibly helpful is actually sharing more information about experiencing interpersonal violence and what the fallout from that might look like. Telling folks about trauma, talking about what we've learned about trauma over, our lifetimes and in our work, that it's common for people to experience what you're experiencing. Like that's a thing, and that it's something that frequently happens. It often happens, and you're not alone in this. And that when someone has experienced abuse, has experienced interpersonal violence, it can feel as if, and as a matter, our life depends on it, on us being on constant alert. So making that the norm, that this level of distress and vigilance and care and concern and fear of being judged makes sense given what people have experienced, and that it may be hard to settle down, it may be hard to open up, it may be hard to trust folks in the environment. And oh, by the way, if we're brand new to folks, we haven't earned their trust yet. So it makes sense that folks would be questioning whether or not we're trustworthy. Letting folks know that sometimes after a few days or weeks that distress comes then, that when people first are engaged with us, they're still, may be on constant alert, but as you get some rest, as you feel settled in, as you begin to trust the people in the new environment and trust the environment, that can be a time to just let go, and that too is common, and that too is to be expected, and we can be here together while that happens. How do we convey those messages? And I would ask all of you, and if anyone has anything you want to share, again, in the chat box, to really think about that. How is it that you all share those messages to people in your day-to-day? And the different messages are helpful at different times. So I would, again, invite folks to share that with our entire community. Are there ways that you're able to talk with folks that actually lessens the feeling of judgment and distress and despair? And then because we asked, and because we knew, and because we remembered, when people said, this is what brings me comfort, this is what helps me settle in, this is what supports physical and emotional safety, we can offer that back. We can offer people things that are in alignment with their beliefs and values because they told us that. Sometimes what we offer comes from our own values base, or it comes from our own beliefs about what's helpful, or it comes from certainty that this is what our program offers. So when folks are in distress and you can offer them something that's in alignment with what we've learned about them, that's going to be helpful. There'll be less chance for more or further disconnection and much more opportunity for actually offering comfort and connection in real ways. So a few strategies for when people can't tell us what they need. So we've asked folks, we've remembered, we've tried those things, we've offered those things, they're not working in the moment, or someone may be new to us and we don't know yet what would be helpful. So part of what to think about is, what would any of us want? How would we want to be treated? How would I want to be treated if I was in distress? So one of the things that I know for sure is having a lot of people coming at me at once, not helpful, or a large barrage of questions, not helpful. So one staff person leads. So if someone's in distress, we're really not sure what would be helpful. One person make an effort at connection. Sometimes that's all there is one of us. So at those times, it's really taking a moment first, again, to ask for other folks who may be in the area and using our services if they could just offer some space. And most folks say yes to that because they can put themselves in that other person's position for a minute and recognize that someday I might need that. I might be in that kind of distress. I might need that too. So it's thinking about then, one person leads, making a connection, use connections that you already have. If you've had a chance to even have a conversation in the past, it's reminding the person that you've talked with them. So when someone's in distress, they may not remember you, they may not remember those conversations, but it may be enough to say, you and I met on Tuesday, we had a conversation yesterday, we talked about, the kinds of things we like to eat or what was helpful when you're upset. Whatever it is you've talked about, name those things. And that can help with grounding someone in a sense of the present as well. So if we had a conversation yesterday or we had a conversation this morning, it's now 10 o'clock and you seem to be struggling. Can I help? Can I sit with you? Can I be with you? So it's being clear, being calm, and being focused. If, as staff, we've not taken time to center ourselves, or if, as someone who's trying to offer support to another person, if I've not taken time to center myself, chances are it will be much more difficult and challenging to stay clear, to stay calm, and to stay focused. I may start thinking about, oh, wait, it's getting late, or this has been going on for a long time, or what if this doesn't settle down and there's, other people that need me? What if this gets worse? So that worry about the what ifs can loom large in real ways. So making connections with other people who know that you're in the middle of something is really important. But it's also important to think for a moment about what this person might want for themselves. So you may not know them well, but in the time that you've known them, what kinds of things have they been clear about, just in terms of what conversation they've offered or how they've talked about themselves or their own experience. So someone doesn't need to know me for very long to know that there's a lot of distraction around me is not helpful. So offering, would you like to talk someplace else? Would you like to be in a different place? Is there another side of the room if we don't have a lot of options for space? Is there a different chair? Is there a different, is it possible to go outside? Is it, what are the options? So it's constantly thinking about offering options that people might want for themselves. And in that, offering what's possible and maybe rethinking action that feels possible. So can we offer mind-body practices and offer people an opportunity to manage themselves? So one of the things that's incredibly helpful, for example, is to just say, can I sit with you? Can I be with you? Can I be next to you? So asking permission for those things, to be in someone's space is helpful. In offering and asking about that permission, is there something that you'd like to do? Would taking a deep breath help? Would moving, just walking around in this room be helpful? So it's offering people to move their body, if that's possible, and to not feel so stuck in the place that they're in the physical place that they're in. Is there something that I can get? Is there something that I can do? So offering folks an opportunity to go get things for themselves also changes the thought, if they can. Is there something you can do or you can get? So the more you put this focus on self-management, the freer people feel to take advantage of those offers. So first, is there something you can do? And then is there something we can do? So really thinking in terms of what kinds of actions. Someone had offered art supplies and writing instead of talking. Excellent, excellent, excellent suggestion. Often what's happening when people are in distress, in our desire to be helpful, we're asking folks to have some pretty specific kinds of conversations that involve thinking and planning at a time when we're not able to think and plan. We're not physically able to think and plan because of the distress we're in. So it's offering people options and also having things that people don't have to ask for. So we've talked some about creating space. So clearing the space, making space, changing the space if that feels helpful. Those are options to offer. And I think what challenges us and what can be uncomfortable for people who are trying to be supportive and helpful is, again, we're trying to, our initial responses can come from a place of, we need to stop this distress, we need to help this person, we need to fix it. And what's more practical, more helpful, and at times much more respectful is, can we think about what you're wanting? Can I be with you? And everything's an invitation. It's an invitation to think about the space we're in. Can we move to a different space? It's an invitation to ask other people to create space because we need privacy. We need to take time to connect, to allow folks to actually see us as supportive and helpful. And if we're rushing that, someone in distress may not understand that our desire is to actually be with, to be supportive, and to be helpful. So making sure that we do have the time, as much time as we can, and to be transparent about that. So if I truly don't have a lot of time, part of my responsibility as a supporter is to think about how can we make this possible, and how do we create spaces that feel we can be in for a while. Do I need to ask for help for myself so I can offer this person what they need? And I think often what happens for us, again, in a desire to be helpful, is we have ideas and we want to offer a lot of things. But what might be more helpful initially is actually communicating with transparency about the possibilities and limitations. Someone says, I really want to go outside. I might need to say, I can't go outside because I can't leave the premises, but I'm wondering if there's something else we can do to create some space here for us. So it's co-creating the space, but also I'm being clear about what my limitations are. And it's not with threat. We're not saying, oh, if you don't do this, then this is going to happen. It's more about what's possible here and now is this. Is there something that we can do so that feels more helpful to you? So it's the offer, it's the invitation that matters. Stay collaborative and offering choices, even when if things feel like they're escalating or that someone's distress is not calming. For people who are offering support and help and assistance, our role is to stay collaborative and offer the choices that are possible. So maybe I can't leave, but we can do some breathing together. Maybe I can't leave, and here's some other things that are possible. I can call someone else in if that's possible. So it's really being transparent, but again, avoiding the threat. It's keeping things in this place of here's an offer, here's an invitation, and being clear about what you can and can't do. Sometimes when people are in distress, what they're talking about and the ways that they're expressing themselves may not be what we're saying and hearing and thinking and believing. So there could be some real differences. And those differences don't necessarily need to be disconnecting. So I've worked with someone, and I've had several family members, and sometimes it's my own experience where, you know, what I would be describing or what someone else would be describing as their reality looks very different than the people who are around them. So I would have a sibling who was really struggling with some mental health challenges and painted black crosses over all of the windows in her apartment. And when I asked what was that about, she said, someone is shooting rays into my stomach. And so there were family members and professionals who were challenging what she was saying. And she had some medical testing done, and what happened is that she was actually had tumors, and they needed some further medical treatment, and the need was real, the need for treatment was real, her experience was real, there was something going on in her body. The way she described it was not how typically others would describe it. So when someone's in distress, I guess the point would be to not challenge what people's beliefs are. We don't have to fuel them, but we also don't have to challenge them. And in that moment, challenging them, those views and beliefs may not be helpful. So it's really talking about, do you understand how someone is expressing themselves? Can you understand what they mean and what they're saying? And can you offer and believe that that's what they believe? And then together, can we calm down about that, or whatever the it is. So if I'm pacing because I've got this level of distress and I have these beliefs, can I do something that feels better in this moment? So if breathing is better, great. If doing more pacing is great. If I need to go outside and I can, that's great. If I need to stay inside because that's what's happening, that's great. It's about the action, and that we don't have to change someone's belief system at the moment they're in crisis. That can be counterproductive. And we can offer options, but there's no need, and it's unhelpful actually, to try to make someone, see our offers as helpful and engage in them in that moment. So we offer options, but we're not prescribing them, and we're holding space for understanding that people have different beliefs of what's happening in the moment, and it's not up to us to fix it or change it. It's, can we offer comfort, and what might that be? Things that folks might find helpful. So if I may be having a hard time, I'm supporting someone else, I'm not sure what to offer. These are things that folks have said are helpful. No one said, oh, it was great that we wrote that great service plan at that moment I was in distress. These are things people have said. People say that just being understood, heard, validated, understood, that speaks volumes to understanding and feeling like I'm in a trustworthy space. Support that is in line with what people believe is actually helpful. So again, we don't have to fuel or challenge beliefs, but given where someone is and how someone is feeling right now, is there some comfort that we can offer? What would feel comfortable to do? People want to know that they were listened to, and not from a place of, I heard you so that I can respond and tell you what to do right now. It's much more, can we listen? Can we validate? Can we let someone know, I heard, I understand, what would be helpful now. Being incredibly transparent about our limitations, being respectful. I would also ask folks, anyone who's interested and able right now, to go ahead and add in the chat box if you have other ideas about what people find helpful. Someone had typed in offering a beverage or a snack. Yes, yes. You know, sometimes it's a change of place, space, and we're still inside. So can we go in the kitchen? Can we have a snack there? Can we, sit and just talk in a different space? Sometimes that can be simple and helpful enough. And it's really thinking about then, do I have a variety of snacks on hand so that people have options about what's possible? But sometimes offering water or tea, sometimes just the offering is enough because it can shift the conversation and have folks thinking something differently about themselves and the person who's trying to support them in that moment. Again, I would welcome folks' ideas about what people may find helpful. So in thinking about this, what would be helpful when people are in distress, there's listening, validating what's happening for someone just noticing, yes, you're in distress. I see that. Is there something that can be helpful? And then offering action that feels possible in the moment. So again, this is not about the big fix or attempting to fix or attempting to fade someone's pain or cover someone's pain or hide someone's pain. It's really in the moment, can we just say, yes, I see your pain. And can we sit? Can we talk? Can we walk? Can we breathe? Can we draw? Can we paste? Can we color? Whatever it is that will be helpful in the moment. So expanding our ideas of action is something we've been talking about here. So asking some of these questions, can you tell me more about what's happening? Can we breathe? Thinking about in advance, are there other body-based kinds of healing that we can do? And can we do them together? There's something in the collaborative working together effort to help people regulate and reset. So I'm doing it with you. I'm not doing it by myself, and I'm certainly not doing it. Someone who's supporting me is not doing something to me. There's something about mind-body practice that feels mutual, that offers opportunity for co-regulating. And because if I'm supporting someone and I'm doing breathing, that's going to help me stay calmer as well. If I'm thinking about grounding practices, I'm going to stay more calm and clear and present as well. So we can sit, we can be, if that would be helpful. So in considering offering action, it really, again, just to kind of underscore what feels respectful and how do I know it's respectful of someone's identity, beliefs, values, and priorities. And that has a better chance of being true if I've actually asked someone. How do we demonstrate caring and understanding, just that we're really present, and thinking about what preserves dignity and what preserves choice, and what sustains a connection. And again, I would offer to the group if folks have things they'd like to add. In case the other folks can't see everything, someone said, saying that this is not your fault, incredibly helpful. Really thinking about, what can we say to one another? What has someone said to you? I mean, I think that's the other thing for us to think about, that each of us has times when we've been in distress and someone has said something that's been helpful. So calling from those resources can be incredibly helpful. Also thinking about that sometimes what can be disconnecting is asking someone, have you had your meds today? And that when we ourselves are offering support and feeling like we're running out of options, that can seem like something to say that makes sense. It can also feel on the receiving end as if we've not had any conversation or understanding about people's views and their capacities and what they feel is helpful. So sometimes asking someone, have you had your meds, can feel like it's not coming from a caring place. It feels like it's coming from a judgmental place. So that thinking about then that range of views is really important, you know, to come back to that and really hold on to what people want for themselves. So there are times when we may need outside support. So thinking about that in advance, what happens on your end about policies, who are your partnerships with, if someone needs medical attention or if someone is in withdrawal, how do those issues get tended to? So that would be something to think about and talk about in advance in your programs in terms of policies. You know, what is the practice and how can we offer things that feel more collaborative before we go to that place? And if we listen to survivors, have people, after someone's been in distress and situations calm down some, can we talk about what was actually helpful? Was I helpful? Have we been helpful? Is there something that we could have done differently? And then actually use the feedback that we get and incorporate it into our work. So I wanted to stop here and offer an opportunity for thoughts, comments, questions. So a couple of thoughts that have come in, again, in case folks can't see it all. Someone's talking about a shelter is considering using therapy dogs. And service dogs can be incredibly helpful. And then someone's commented on, you know, funding, right? So it's what I'm appreciating about those comments is that we are often have these great ideas for what we could offer in the moment or what we could put into policy and practice, think about long-term and big picture, and what could we offer, and that funding is often tied to what actually happens with those ideas. So I just wanted to acknowledge that that's a reality for many of us in our service settings. I'm appreciating where folks are coming from with that. I'm wondering if there are any questions for us to consider. So Erin, I'm wondering if there are any questions that have come in for us to think about.
Hey there. So far, we don't have any direct questions, but folks have been offering a lot of comments around like therapy animals or things that you kind of addressed already. So just as a reminder, if people have specific questions for Kathy, you can post them in the chat box so that she's got some time to engage with that stuff.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So one thing I will talk a little bit about is the notion of centering self. One of the comments, one of the participants had said, centering self was mentioned a few times. And while that's a practice that many folks have used, it's not something that others might be familiar with. And what I would offer is how I think about centering self is not actually connected to a specific practice, but I would offer it as something that any of us can do in terms of really taking stock of where am I standing in this moment, what's happening for me in this moment, and calling up my personal and individual resources before I step into interactions with others. So it's along the lines of if I'm on a plane and the announcement is when the oxygen mask comes down, take care of your own first before you offer to others. And I'm aware that there are many mind-body practices that actually use the language of centering self, and I'm appreciative of those practices. But in this sense, how I was thinking about it is in terms of, as an individual, can I just pause, take a deep breath, take stock of what I have available to me in this moment? Do I have what I need, and what can I offer? And then offer what feels possible. If I step into a conversation with someone who's already in distress, and I too am already activated, in distress, worried, have racing thoughts, have unfinished things that I was trying to do and feel now interrupted, that I'm going to go deal with this next thing. It's to be able to press pause and say, I need to set all of that aside, and I need to connect right here with this person in this space right now and offer the resources that I have.
Thanks, Kathy. I think there was also a question about specific advice for supporting folks over the phone, so for people who are doing crisis intervention on hotline calls. That
is so much more challenging for me because I'm a person, you know, I'm a person to person. That's when I feel my strongest and feel my best. And I know that a lot of the support we give is over the phone. And I think some of the things that are still true are around, one is centering yourself and inviting the person who's in distress, even over the phone, to just take a minute and breathe with you. I've worked with a number of folks who operate peer support lines, and there's a lot of co-regulating that happens in those environments. So some of it really starts with, I mean, of course, listening to what's happening with the person. As often you, when you're on a call, you get a lot of information all at once, and it's hard to, you just take it in, where you get a sense that interrupting right now wouldn't be good. So it's when you can, it's appreciating that the person chose to share everything that they just shared with you, and that's huge. And that there is a lot happening, and really appreciating that they've called. And then before we do more and think about doing more, can we just take a breath together? Can we breathe together? I happen to use a pattern breathing, and it's called 4-7-8 breathing. And you inhale for 4, you hold to the count of 7, and then you exhale to the count of 8. Others, there's many, many different kinds. There's another kind of pattern breathing where you inhale to the count of 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, wait for 4. That sometimes offering people just an opportunity to take a breath if they're in distress but they're not under current threat. So when someone's under current threat, of course, we're not, to have a conversation saying, can you pause for a minute and breathe with me won't make sense to anyone. But if it's navigating the distress, that emotional distress in this moment, breathing together, even over the phone, can be helpful. And then talking about some of the same things that we have been talking about, what's possible in the moment. In the past, asking folks in the past, what's been helpful? How have you ever felt like this before? When you felt like this before, what was helpful? So it's really thinking about when you're offering something that's possible in the moment, it's expanding the notion of what feels possible. So is there breath work to do together? Is there grounding work to do together? Can you tell me more about the space you're in right now? Is a great question for over the phone, because sometimes folks can kind of re-regulate and kind of connect to their own environment, and the process of doing that will lessen distress. So it's what are the resources that folks have? And yes, asking people about diagnosis. Have you had this before, experienced this before? Have you had treatment before? You can have very clear and very upfront conversations around diagnosis. You can ask people very clearly in very upfront ways about medication. It's just that's not the place you want to begin. When someone's in distress, asking those conversations feels like adding labels on top of what people currently feel. And so getting to that can be helpful, and having an understanding of that can be helpful. And really thinking about, again, whether in person or over the phone, conversations about, is there something that you can change in your space right now that would be helpful? Because sometimes there's a need to establish some more control after feeling out of control.
Thanks, Kathy. Maybe you would do two more?
Sure.
Okay. So someone did ask a question about regarding trauma. Is there a need to talk through and process through the trauma in order to heal, even if the client doesn't want to talk about it?
I love that someone asked that question, and thank you very much. So there's lots of views around this as well. So it's another thing to ask people, would it be helpful to talk about what you've experienced or not? There have been folks who have really strongly believed that the only way to heal is to talk about it. I happen to come from a different school of thought. I think that when people are ready to talk about their experiences, that it's important for us to be present when they're ready, but digging at that can cause more distress. So it's in the offering of, would it be helpful for us to spend time right now? When I know better, when I know you better, when you know me better, when you're sure I'm trustworthy, then you'll tell me what you want me to know. And I think that often it's more important to establish relationship, to establish connection, so that people can tell us whatever they want, whenever they want, in the ways that they want, and the ways that they can. That's more important than me insisting that you tell me what happened to you. That can feel re-traumatizing. It can be re-victimizing. It can feel disconnecting. It can also disrupt the relationship that we've been trying to build in the first place. So it's holding space as supporters and helpers, that when people want to tell us, we're there and we're ready and we're open to that sharing, but it's not us pushing for the sharing.
Thank you so much. So I think, Kathy, if you want to say any last thoughts, otherwise I think we might wrap up.
Cool. No, I just wanted to say to folks to please, go to the center website. We have the rest of the webinars that are part of the series are there, and we will also have announcement of other upcoming webinars. I know that the next one we have coming up as part of the mental health series is around understanding and navigating when self-injury is part of the coping strategies that people use. So we'll have some conversation about that I'm very much looking forward to. And thank you all very much for your time and attention. Much appreciated.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kathy. So I just want to wrap everything up by saying thank you to Kathy for such an exceptional webinar today. Thank you to Caption Colorado for providing today's captioning. And thank you to Angelica Medina and Carla Alegria for helping make the webinar run so smoothly. Last but not least, thank you all for spending your time with the center. Within the next week, I will send you all a follow-up email with a link of the recording of today's webinar, in addition to the slides and the handouts referenced, all of which will also be available on our website. And you will also receive a certificate of attendance for your time today. We're going to post the link, the survey link, in the chat box. So if you all wouldn't mind taking a moment to let us know what worked and what could have been better, that would be great. And we will send it out again with our follow-up email next week. So thank you all again. We hope you have a great afternoon, and we really appreciate you spending your time with us.
Thanks, Erin.